Beginning the last round, Mr. Genuis, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. Ms. Daly had mentioned previously that her interview with investigators was recorded, but that she has not received a copy. It seems that that is a crucial piece of evidence. So first off, if there's agreement, I'd like the committee to order a copy of that recording from the government. So is there agreement to do that, Chair?
I'll just pause the clock here. You're asking for?
For agreement to order from the government a copy of the recording that's been referred to as part of the investigation involving Ms. Daly. That's been referred to frequently. I saw nods all around, I think, so.
Mr. Genuis, yeah. I mean, if you're posing a motion, you can do that. Let's get the testimony from Mrs. Daly, and we can swing back around that. If you want to put forward a motion, you can. But
this is normal process. We've asked for a lot of documents.
Well, I see head shaking all over the place.
From who? Who's shaking their heads?
Do you want a roll call vote, Mr. Genuis? You've got 4 minutes, 40 seconds in your time. Go.
Sure, we'll take a vote. I'm happy to take a vote.
Sorry, Chair, we don't know what we're voting on, so we'd love to see a motion.
Miss Genuis, Miss Clay, there is no vote. I paused the clock. Mr. Genuis, you have the floor. If you're moving a motion to get documents, you can do so.
Okay. Is there agreement of the committee to order that recording? If there's agreement of the committee, we don't have a problem. But if
point of order, Chair, the witness has already volunteered to offer the information.
Exactly.
Yes.
No, she doesn't. She doesn't have this. We're talking about the recording of her interview that she does not have that the government has. So we need to request this information from the government, not from her.
Well, Ms. Khalid, yes.
Sorry, Chair. I'm not exactly sure what recording we're talking about. So if Mr. Genuis can be more clear in a written motion, I'd be more than happy to review it and provide my support or the lack thereof.
Ms. Genuis,
but I do need to see it.
Yeah, Ms. Genuis, you do not have consent. You have 4 minutes and 30 seconds to go. Over to you, please.
Okay. With all due respect to my Liberal colleagues, I think it's pretty clear what recording we're talking about. It's been repeatedly referred to in these hearings, and Ms. Callie doesn't want that produced. We'll certainly be following up on that. And she
sorry, Chair, I take exception to being named.
Okay, Mr. Genuis, I've stopped the clock. That's Ms. Khalid, you can take exception. There's another government spot remaining.
Chair.
Ms. Khalid,
Point of order, Chair.
What is your point of order? Chair.
My point of order is specifically with respect to following procedure that you have outlined and Mr. Genuis not continuing to follow it. And I would appreciate if you could ensure that Mr. Genuis does follow
that is not a point of order. I made my ruling. I think it was one the committee would broadly agree with. Mr. Genuis has the floor. If he wants, he can now. It's his comments, and your side will have an opportunity to respond to Mr. Genuis afterwards, and whoever does that can address it. And that person will have the floor, and I will do my best to keep Mr. Genuis from interrupting that person. Mr. Genuis, you have the floor for 4 minutes and just under 30 seconds, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have seen throughout how Ms. Khalid has been repeatedly unruly, trying to disrupt this investigation into Liberal corruption, and I think that's revealing. And I'll press on here. April 17th. The whole thing looks very odd, frankly, very rotten, and we're continuing to try to get answers from this corruption scandal. Minister Mendicino wants a head on a platter. What we're looking for is answers, and yet people who are frank and try to give answers seem to be subject to retaliation. So in that light, Mr. Chair, I'd like to propose a motion in light of the fact that we haven't gotten agreement to do these things more consensually. The motion is that in light of the testimony and evidence provided by Diane Daly, the committee order the production of the recording, which Ms. Daly referenced in her testimony, and call the following people to appear before the committee on ArriveCan, and particularly to respond to the new information Ms. Daly has presented: Lizanne Bolduc, Tom von Schoenberg, Ariane Reza, Christian Firth, and Aaron O'Gorman. I've read that motion out, and I will
right.
send the slightly revised version.
Yeah, Mr. Jennings, could you send in that motion, and we will. I believe you already have a translated copy, but you have made some changes to it. Could you please send that in right away? And I'm going to send it right away, Ms. Shanahan, and I'm going to suspend. But send it right away, Ms. Jennings. I'm going to suspend for a few minutes. Hearing back into session. The motion has been sent around. Mr. Genuis, do you want to speak to it again briefly? If not, I'm going to turn to other members who have signaled a willingness to or a desire to speak to it.
Yeah, Chair, I'll make a few comments about it. Thank you for the opportunity. So this is a motion following Ms. Daly's testimony, explosive testimony today, which seeks to invite people that her testimony implicates or addresses to come before this committee and respond to the important points she makes. It's also about seeking material information that we need as part of our investigation. So here is the context as I see it. What are we trying to do here at Public Accounts? This committee is looking for the truth. We want to get accurate information to get to the bottom of what happened in the Arrive scam affair. And we have clearly different members or factions within senior public service who are criticizing each other, accusing each other of lying, of covering up information, of trying to cover people at the political level, et cetera. We have these very serious accusations flying back and forth between senior officials within the Trudeau government. It's all a mess. Money's been wasted, but there are accusations of intimidation, of cover-up, of reprisal that this committee has to get to the bottom of. So this compounds the concern about the Arrive scam affair itself, the tens of millions of dollars that were spent, the broken system of government contracting, but also the lying, the corruption, the cover-ups, the reprisals, and the accusations back and forth between different officials to that effect. Ms. Daly has had the finger pointed at her. She's come back and provided a number of points to counter that, including evidence about various senior officials and things they have said to her. And also she's referenced a recording, a lengthy recording involving her and people that were investigating her. And I think that recording is critical for us understanding whether or not she's faced intimidation, the tone of that, the expectations. What she's told us as a committee is that she was expected to point the finger at Mr. McDonald and Utano. When she didn't do that, then that led to a kind of aggression and pressure. We need to hear that recording to get to the bottom of whether or not her testimony in this regard is credible or not. Here's how I see the process having unfolded. On November the 7th, Mr. McDonald and Utano are before OGO. At that time, they delivered critical testimony of the government. They called leading government witnesses liars. They gave scathing testimony, and they identified that as part of the response to the ArriveCan affair, Minister Mendicino had been seeking someone's head on a platter. He wanted someone's head on a platter. So later that month, these two, Mr. McDonald and Utano, get letters indicating further investigation for bad behavior right after their committee testimony, strikingly, and they're later suspended without pay. So Ms. Daly is brought in December. She is, according to her testimony, asked to point the fingers at Mr. McDonald and Utano. She says no. And later that month, they start investigating her. So now you have another public servant, a third, who's under investigation, who appears to be brought under investigation in the same month where they were refusing to play ball with the government's narrative. So this raises big questions. February 12th, the Auditor General puts out her scathing report on the Arrive scam affair, in which she says, among other things, that GC Strategies worked with government officials discussing the specifications of a contract they would then bid on, and obviously that's a problem. Christian Firth comes to OGO on March the 13th. He refuses to say who he sat down with, which officials were being referenced in the Auditor General's point, and he is so committed to refusing to give that information that he is called to the bar he admonished in order to give responses. And this brings us to late April 17th. At that point, he readily gives the name of Diane Daly, a relatively junior public servant who already is under investigation, although he's not supposed to know she's under investigation. So the whole thing raises the question, why did Mr. Firth give Diane Daly's name at that point? Now, maybe he just, after having covered up for so long, he finally decided to do the right thing. That's one explanation. He just decided at that point he was going to do the right thing. But another possible explanation is that Mr. Firth had decided to support the Liberal government's efforts to pin the blame for the Arrive scam fiasco on a few officials while absolving others. That he was supporting efforts to help achieve Mr. Mendicino's sought-after head on a platter by facilitating efforts of some in government to point the blame at other senior officials and effectively try to cauterize the wound to keep the discussion from actually digging all the way through to the answers. So this really exposes a sharp division among senior public servants about who is responsible. And I am, for I think obvious reasons, deeply suspicious of anything and everything that Christian Firth has said to committee in the House and in public. And I certainly don't think we should take at face value his claims about Ms. Daly. I think we need to investigate them further, which is why, in the interest of answering the questions we need answered, in the interest of getting to the truth, I put forward this motion to bring in key witnesses who can respond to Ms. Daly's testimony, and also getting that recording. I think this should be a fairly simple matter. This is about getting to the truth, and these witnesses and that recording will allow this committee to get to the truth. Was Ms. Daly, in fact, someone that was deeper into this than her testimony suggests, or are other people within this Liberal government trying to point the finger at her to protect themselves from blame splashing back on them? We want to get to the truth, and this motion will help us do that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Genuis. I am going to turn now to Ms. Shanahan. I am also liken myself to the European football referee. The clock is ticking here. Ms. Shanahan, you do have the floor. There's no limit to how long you have to speak, but if you get my hint, I would like to hear from people before the clock does run out. Over to you, please, Ms. Shanahan.
Chair, your hint is well taken. Thank you very much. Because I was looking forward to my speaking slot in this meeting, and but here we are speaking to this motion. But I would like to just refer to if there's been talk of a narrative, that there's a narrative and that it's a Liberal narrative, that it's a government narrative, and so on. And I'm just wondering if the witness is aware. She is an experienced civil servant, and I was going to ask her how she felt about her testimony, which is heartfelt, which has been very detailed, of which I still had questions regarding some of the responses, dates, and conversations that didn't seem to line up, and I was looking for clarity on those responses, and yet I wonder how the witness feels about her testimony being used to basically be a Twitter feed for members of the official opposition. And I just say that if that's the case, if the witness's name is dragged into that kind of partisan narrative, that I deeply regret that has happened. But I think the witness, as an experienced civil servant, can see what has been going on here today. That being said, regarding this motion, which is one that I also have difficulty understanding, because public accounts, we're not an investigative body. We're certainly not an investigative body as to any into deep dives into wrongdoing. That is the work of the Auditor General. We review the reports of the Auditor General, and then we go into detail about those reports, which is what we have been doing here, even though at many times, actually, it's quite redundant, the testimony that we hear and the hearings that have been called for. This topic, what we have heard today by the witness, is already part of an internal investigation, and I am very reluctant, and I wonder if the witness feels the same way, that we would interfere with that investigation. I don't know how it would be helpful. As for Christian Firth, who has not appeared before this committee, but which we've seen much of his testimony, both in OGO and in the House, I'm not sure what else that we can get from him. So it's very weird that we are here today, very bizarre, going down this rabbit hole and subjecting, quite honestly, the witness, who has been forthright and is now apparently being accused of not being forthcoming in her testimony here today. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Daly, those questions are all rhetorical. Once we move into a motion, we debate the motion, and questions are not posed to the witness. On that, because I am running out of time, I do want to thank you, Ms. Daly, for your testimony and participation in relation to the study Report 1 Arrive. You can send any information that was either requested from you today that you agreed to surrender to the clerk, and any questions you might have about how to do that can go to the clerk as well. I'm going to turn now back to the motion at hand. Ms. Daly, you're welcome. You can remain there, or you can gather up your things and excuse yourself if you like. The choice is yours. In the meantime, I'm going to go back to Mr. Desjardins for some comments on this motion. Again, recognizing that we are pressed for time. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'll attempt to be brief. I agree with the motion. Before Ms. Daly leaves, however, I was wondering if maybe you could pose a question on behalf of our committee for us to enhance this motion. In the testimony that was presented today, several times did Ms. Daly mention a very credible problem within the public service that I feel our committee could largely get answers to, related to the TBIPS program and that verified list, and whoever operates that list, and how persons like a two-person company in a basement of GC Strategies could have even gotten onto a list of preferred or preferable contractors. Ms. Daly's testimony did highlight that as a credible issue related to the ongoing systemic corruption that does exist. And so I'd like to see if we can get a friendly agreement by the mover to include, I'm not trying to exclude anything, I'm trying to include another representative in the list of witnesses. If Ms. Daly has a recommendation as to who that person is, or otherwise, I just ask the clerk to include the highest ranking public servant in the TBIPS program to also bear witness to our questions, if that's possible. Mr. Chair, is my first point.
Sure, I'm going to address that, and I'll come right back to Mr. Desjardins. Ms. Daly is here. She's heard your request. If she would like to submit something in writing, I will allow that, but I'm not going to turn to her, because that violates the motion debate where we're at now. So I go back to you, Mr. Desjardins. But Ms. Daly, should you wish to respond to Ms. Daly, should you wish to respond to Mr. Desjardins' question, you can do so overnight in writing if you like. Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to just thank my colleagues for their time today and their good questions. I'd implore that we vote in favor of this motion. There's reasonable grounds to suggest that there is more information that's been brought to light that requires proper testimony and proper questioning, particularly to those witnesses that have not yet been present. I recognize there could be some debate amongst my Liberal and Conservative colleagues as to the list itself, but I implore you to ignore the obvious issues that could be presented both in schedule and time to having that many witnesses present. But I do, in fact, think, for the purpose of good governance and our role here in public accounts, that there is credible reason for us to invite these witnesses again. I just want to mention my portion of the amendment I'm requesting as a friendly amendment, and I think, Mr. Genuis, you would agree that having a representative from TBIPS would be important to the continuation. Okay. That was part of the included information that was made by the testimony today. Ms. Daly did present and fairly presented a very credible and important assertion that there ought to be relevant investigation to how groups like GC Strategies and others could have even been made a preferable contractor. And I find credibility in that proposition of question. And I think it's worth us asking TBIPS in order for us to better understand how, in fact, GC Strategies got through the door. My hope is that we can find unanimous consent to do that. Mr. Chair, I seek your advice as to whether or not we could do that by way of consent of the mover rather than having to have an amendment in a debate.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm afraid normally I would perhaps say yes, but given the time constraint I am under, and I would like to hear from Madame Sinclair-Dingé. Ms. Khalid, I was communicating with Madame Sinclair-Dingé online before she put her hand up. I'd like to finish with her, and then I'm going to adjourn the meeting because I am out of time. So, Madame Sinclair-Dingé. In the meantime, Mr. Desjardins, you can consult with Mr. Genuis. Madame Sinclair-Dingé, you have the floor, please.
Sure.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vais tenter d'être.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to make this quick so that we don't exhaust our resources past the time that's remaining. I am in favor of this motion and the amendment proposed by Mr. Desjardins when it comes to the presence of a high-ranking civil servant in charge of the program that has been mentioned multiple times here, which also has shown significant gaps in procurement at the federal government level. There is one aspect, however, which seems a bit inappropriate to me, is to have Mr. Firth back again. I think we came to the very end of his testimony at committee or at the House of Commons. So I would recommend two things. So I will have an amendment too. So the first one is to change Miss Lisanne Bolduc's name. There's a typo in their name. I think that would be an easy fix. And the second one would be about Mr. Firth. I don't think we can extract anything more than from another appearance.
I'm out of resources. This meeting is adjourned. We'll